think we need to start positive. Montreal, the one Canadian team, with a win last night, beating Atlanta. Next up is Charlotte and then New York City FC. And look at this. Montreal are suddenly in the playoff spots. All right, there's so much to unpack here, but Josef Martinez, Ollie, was he just waiting for the really important matches? 5 in his last 3 games.
No, I don't think he was waiting for those moments. Having said that, I think that without celebrating, he was extremely happy to put 2 past Atlanta, his old club, last night. No, I think it's just a question of either Laurent Courtois hanging his hat on Martinez, or Laurent Courtois seeing that there's just no alternative to Martinez. He was the lesser of 2 poisons maybe a few weeks ago, and now he's just taken off completely with 5 goals in 3 games. I think Matthias Kokorov's poor performances, the fact that you don't really feel he's able to connect with others as Martinez is doing with lots of dummies. Like, since you've had Martinez, Caden Clark, and Bryce Duke playing together, even though I still have a question mark over Bryce Duke and his ability to deliver a final pass in the last third. I mean, that team from an attacking perspective has just looked nothing like what we've seen since the beginning of the season.
Dubs, you obviously cover and watch Montreal very closely as well.
Mm-hmm.
Are you surprised by the Martinez renaissance, shall we call it, or was it always percolating there in the background?
It was always percolating, but it seemed like it was beneath a couple of layers, right? Like this team sort of mid-season where they would hit a low and then it wasn't quite rock bottom. There was always something. There was like a sub-basement or a sub-level before you really got down to, you know, that Forge defeat in Canadian Championships or the 5-0 defeat to the Revs. But now all of a sudden, and I think it was Andrew Wiebe I saw yesterday previewing all of these big contests in Eastern Conference to determine the 8th and 9th, like your final playoff spots in the table. And he called it the Eastern Conference Peloton of Mediocrity. And I love that because I think that the way that they're playing, yes, it was their first away win since they won in Miami in March, in like 15 games on the road, which is remarkable. But it's because they've been so poor that all of a sudden a team that looks a little bit cohesive, a little bit kind of, you know, together, and they're able to replicate hallmarks of play. You're seeing passages of play, patterns of play, brilliance from certain players in certain moments that it looks, wow, it's so impressive, but they're still doing it and they're in a good run of form when it matters. So I think Martinez is the guy that those nuances to his game, they've always been there, but it was whether or not maybe he wanted to do it. And it was just a matter of time before you got the right players in there with them. And to Ollie's point, a guy like Kokoro wasn't delivering. A guy like Vilsaint just never seemed to kind of show up this season, never seemed to hit a good run of form, but also his fitness was always questionable. Sanusi Ibrahim remains a question mark for me, like why he was your leading scorer for a long time in this season, but doesn't really seem to be favored by Courtois. But it doesn't matter now because you have a guy of Martinez's quality who can deliver when it matters in the right moments. A guy like Pierce who can pick him out after a brilliant run to the first post. So they're finally seeming to like firing on all cylinders, which for them, there's a ceiling on it, but it looks so good in comparison to what this fan base and what this team was producing.
Ollie, are you confident that it's clicked, or do you still need to see a lot in the next 2 games to hope that not just making the playoffs, obviously, but that this team can go on a run in the playoffs?
That's a good question. I think they can go on a run if everybody stays healthy, because I think what's been a big difference over the last few weeks is the fact that Laurent Courtois finally has a starting 11. And I told you guys we were joking about a crackerjack box of a starting 11 a few weeks back, and that's completely disappeared. I mean, you know exactly if you were to start the playoffs tomorrow what that starting 11 looks like, and it seems as though it just dropped from the sky a few weeks back after so much kind of lab work trying to figure out what the right recipe was. So I think that if everybody's healthy, yes. Now, concerning the next 2 matches, I don't know. I think NYCFC will reveal a lot about that team if they're not already qualified for the playoffs. But the match at the weekend, I was really happy to see Laurent Courtois didn't rotate the squad yesterday in Atlanta, because that's what he did last time they were playing away midweek in a 3-game week. And it was a bit of a disaster. Basically, you were on a good run. You were after beating Charlotte at home, and you went to the Revs, and the team was flat. They got a 2-2 draw after trailing 2-0, but the team was flat. He decided to go with the same starting 11 yesterday, but you could see that some of the guys were running on fumes. Nathan Saliba didn't have a great game. Caden Clark didn't have a great game. And that's okay, because I think you needed the stability and you got the 3 points. Can you do the same at the weekend again? No. So I think we'll have to make some changes, if only to keep guys healthy and avoid injuries. And for that reason, I'm not sure we'll get too much info about that team's stability or ability to go far in the playoffs at the weekend. But on decision day, I think that will absolutely be the case.
I have to say, it's nice to talk positively about Montreal and not have to endure more smugness from Asa Raymond about the Whitecaps after a bad loss to Seattle last night, 3-0. Now, listen, Asa, the Caps, they've clinched the playoffs anyway, right? So is it being framed as a bad loss regardless, considering that where they finish in the table is still pretty important?
Yeah, the fans are very frustrated by not just the loss, but the performance, which was, the team looked really lethargic, no energy, no push really right from the opening whistle of this match. Didn't create enough chances. Somehow throughout first half that, they were just dominated at home again. It was another poor home performance. And they were only down a goal in the first half. In the second half, they had a chance. They started to come on a little bit in the second half. Pedro Vite had a glorious opportunity that was cleared off the line by Nuhu, and that could have changed the game. Like we talk about, goals change games, but back came Seattle, get a spot shot and put it away, and then it made it 3-0. So Seattle was definitely deserving of the result. Definitely deserving of the 3-0 scoreline. And then there was a lot of frustration, especially online. And we took calls in the post-match show, and we had someone calling in. Don't usually get people calling in, but it was like an old-timey radio show where they were calling in and upset. Scott called in, and he was very frustrated with the fact that the Caps didn't make changes early enough, didn't make the substitutions till the 70th minute when the fans wanted to see some sort of injection of life, pace, energy. Now, Vanni Sartini joined us in the post-match show as well, and he was talking about how it looked like the fixture congestion kind of finally caught up with them, the Canadian Championship, midweek matches. This was another one, and maybe a bit of a hangover after knowing that you've clinched the MLS playoffs pretty early in the season when you think about things, with 4 games remaining for the Vancouver Whitecaps at that point. So, yeah, a bit of a letdown performance. Really no excuse, though, because it was still a pretty strong team, and they should have at least put up a better showing in front of the home fans. Missed some key players, Ali Ahmed and Ryan Gauld, both out dealing with injuries where I think they would have played if it were a playoff game, but given the circumstances, kind of rested, looking ahead to upcoming matches. And the next one's a big one, and not much rest in between these 2 games. So, yeah, played against Seattle on Wednesday and then back at it at home against Minnesota. And I asked Fanny about that game, what he wants to see from the last 3 games, really. And he said the Minnesota game's a big one. Really wants the guys to show up and see way more energy than we saw against Seattle on Wednesday.
Is it a concern that looking at the top of the West and how they played against the teams above them, LA Galaxy, they shipped 7 goals, lost twice. They lost to Seattle, obviously, who's in a great run, beat them earlier in the season. Real Salt Lake lost. LAFC lost 3-0. Is this a concern looking into the playoffs and how they're going to compete against the better teams in the league, in their division?
Yeah, I think that they're not playing their best at the moment. I mean, you can even go back to the TFC match where Toronto was the better team, and they just kind of eked it out, got it done in penalties, but they haven't been playing well for the past 2 weeks. So that is concerning. Yes, the fact that other teams in the West are starting to find their form, also very concerning. They need to get a result. They need to get a game from one of these last 3 to kind of get that belief once again, because you have to look back a long ways to the last sort of good win, and even that one's maybe San Jose. So it hasn't been good against good opponents, like you said. So you've got some good teams coming in, and they may rest some players as well. So an opportunity against LAFC, RSL, good opponents, where if you do get a good result, you get some goals, you get a win, maybe you get some confidence going into the playoffs. I think they desperately need that, whether it's Minnesota, LAFC, or RSL. You want a statement win from one of those 3 games going into the playoffs, just to give you a bit of belief. And then everything opens up in the playoffs, right? Then you gain your momentum and your confidence in the playoffs if you start getting results. But if they don't get it and you go in pretty cold, there's concern that could be an early exit. And that would be a disappointing season for the Vancouver Whitecaps if they don't make it past one round of the playoffs.
Asa, you were talking about fans calling in to the show, the post-game show, bemoaning the Whitecaps' performance. And you mentioned Scott. Is he famous? Does he call in a lot? Does he go by one name? I need to know more about Scott.
Scott from Burnaby.
Yeah, Scott from Maple Ridge, actually.
Oh, is it? Okay.
He's active on Twitter.
He's a right
He is one of these guys. That's right. And I mean, there's a few of those. Some always looking at the positives, right, and trying to find the silver lining. And then, you have some people that are definitely frustrated. And it's pretty typical, I guess, with teams, any sports team, really, where you have these people. I feel like there's like 2 sides to it, right? Some people who like love Vanni Sartini, love everything that he does, and a big fan. And then the other one that's like, oh, I can't wait for him to go for whatever reason. And they're just quiet until something happens. And then it's like, oh yeah, this, they should have done all these different things. And that was Scott. So he called in and let us know everything that went wrong with the Vancouver Whitecaps on Wednesday night.
I really missed calling post-game shows. Right?
It was great. He was going in at first. I was like, what did we do? Like, why? But I was like, no, this is amazing. Like, let it all out, Scott. Let it all out.
Sometimes I'll listen to TalkSport UK, I know, after a Premier League weekend or an England game, and it's just, wow, I'm so happy I don't live there anymore. Holy shit. Some of these people, like, what rocks do they crawl out from? I mean, it's incredible, but that's sports fans and all. That would be the case if TFC had a call-in show post-match of most games this season. That would be really interesting, JMO. Listen, I'm going to ask you, JMO. So TFC lose 4-1 to the Red Bulls. Mm-hmm. Post-match press conference. I'm assuming you're the John that John refers to in this quote. The question was, how do you explain that, basically the performance, as it was such an important game? And John Herdman's quote was, life, John, life. Humans, big moments, under pressure, personalities, coaching decisions, selection, structure comes down to having people with a personality that want that moment, that really want that moment. We'll look inwards first, as we always do as a staff, from the medical to the sports science to the technical, the decisions that have been made, good, bad, or indifferent, in the last 2 days. Every week, Herdman's box office with his quotes, right? I mean, holy crap, he is throwing everyone under the bus, including himself there.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. Because the first question out of the gate was, he was just asked about, what he thought of the team's performance. And he talked about how, obviously it wasn't good enough, and that for a team that was fighting for its playoff life, it showed an amazing lack of urgency. And so my follow-up question was, well, how do you explain that, John? I mean, as you said, this was an important game. You would expect that if, for any game that the players are going to be up for, it would be this one. And yet, they put in this rather tepid performance. And that's, where he said all that stuff, life, John, life, and humans, and just through everything. Look, he's clearly frustrated. I mean, he walked into the press room after the game yesterday, and he was wearing it on his face. You could just tell that he is at his wit's end. And I think as he's going to go nuts here if this is going to continue much longer. But what can he do? He's in a very tough situation. Lorenzo Insigne is injured supposedly and can't play through pain, and he's been ruled out essentially. Like John said, maybe we can get 5 or 10 minutes out of him on the weekend, but I doubt it. Federico Bernardeschi has now gone 17 games in all competitions without a goal, and he gets 2 yellow cards against the Red Bulls, which means he's suspended for Saturday's game. They give away 2 really sort of needless penalties, both committed by Shane O'Neill. This team is just in a free-for-all. I mean, there's winless in 5 and 1 win in 7 games in their last 7 competitions. But what can you do? I mean, he has limited options now, and he's kind of stuck with what he has, and he has to somehow, turn water into wine with the players that he has, and I just don't think it's possible.
Jimmy, he's saying a lot there, but there's a lot he wants to say as well right now. I know he's taking the blame across the board, from everyone, from medical staff to coaching to the players. Where is the blame here? Jimmy, you play for the team, you've coached. Where's the blame?
Well, the manager's got to take responsibility. Absolutely does. I mean, I watch this team, and at times it's like Keystone Cops. They're all over the place. Defensively, an absolute shambles. They don't look organized. I don't like the way that they play, the movement, the patterns. There's no identity. And you can see the players are getting frustrated. They're frustrated with the performances. And they're getting picked apart against so many teams that it's ridiculous. I mean, I don't know if you saw the one goal where there's 6 TFC defenders around the ball and one guy, and the left back
was Tolkien's goal.
Tolkien must have ran 60 yards in open space. You could see his eyes light up, just thinking, how do I have this runway right now? And he goes in one-on-one with keeper, scores. 6 players around, like defensively, they're so unorganized. They're an absolute disaster to watch, and everybody's frustrated. You heard the fans. You saw them. You heard them last night. They were leaving early. The players on the pitch are getting booked, sent off for stupid fouls. They're frustrated. It's terrible the way that this team is playing at the moment. And now, I don't understand. Like, he can blame whoever he wants. You had 15 games last season that you wanted to observe to see what was happening. Then you had a preseason. Then you went out and got 8 players. Now, all of a sudden, the shit hits the fan. It's, now we got to look at this, got to look at that. Like, how much more time do you want? Things are not going well for you. You have to sit down with your staff and figure this out, because you haven't won the Canadian Championship. You had the opportunity. If you get knocked out of playoffs, it's an absolute disaster of a season for Toronto FC with one of the highest wage bills in the league. There's no excuses whatsoever.
Yeah, if you're a team that's in a bad form, like New York Red Bulls, I mean, I think they came in 6 games without a win, or 1 win in their last 11 games, and they come in and absolutely crush you. I don't know where that comes from, John. I've been looking at that Vancouver game when they played in the Canadian Championship. Toronto played really well, I thought, for mass majority of that game. Where is that consistency? Like, I just don't get how this team, with the players that they have, don't perform more consistent than they do. And is it down to Insigne? Is he a poison? And is he trying to play his way out of this club? Insigne? It seems to me he's trying to work his way out of this club one way or the other, obviously with a big pay packet, perhaps.
Well, Jamie, is he? I mean, listen, I know there's conversation last night on One Soccer about a buyout. Is that an option? That's a big freaking buyout. And I'm not sure MLSC would be too, hungering for that.
No, I mean, like, people have to understand that he's under contract through the end of June of 2026. So that's another season and a half. He earns $15 million a year. So if TFC and MLSE wants to buy him out, they have to pay up $22 million. They're not going to pay that. They're not going to pay him $22 million to walk away for a buyout. That's just not going to happen. Now, what might happen is they might sort of come to some agreement with them in terms of a mutual termination of his contract, and maybe he takes less, like about, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 million. But even then, I don't know that MLSE is going to be all that anxious to pay, millions of dollars to a guy just to walk away. So, what do you do? I think the unfortunate truth is that they're stuck with him until the end of this contract, unless they can sell him off, or unless he decides that he wants to leave. But they really have their hands tied just by the sheer numbers and the length of this deal. There's not much that they can do.
Maybe it's almost fitting, though, that this last match of the season potentially it is a must-win, and they need help. It's not going to happen. But there's this must-win game, the most important game of the season, and the 2 high-profile DPs are not playing in it. That kind of symbolizes the last 2.5 years, right? With respect to Bernardeschi, who's played well at times. Has he lived up to being, a $7-8 million player? I'm not sure about that. But, obviously fingers are pointing towards Insigne. However, the good news is, before we move on, Seba Javinko put out a little post yesterday saying, come out on the 4th, got a pretty big announcement at BMO Field. Everything's going to be great. What is the announcement, JMO? Do you know what it is?
I don't know for a fact, but I mean, I suspect it's going to be some sort of retirement or just some sort of message along the lines of that. I mean, I'm a little disappointed just because, just when all this bring back, Seba talk had finally died down, and I didn't like sort of talk about it anymore as complete nonsense. Now he sort of posts this message, and just my DMs and my text messages and my emails have been littered. Oh, Seba's coming back. He's not coming back.
You're saying that.
He's not.
Scott from Vancouver.
Oh.
So let's just put an end to this right now.
I mean, if I was TFC, I would say, can you play just one more game? At least couldn't be any worse.
5 or 10 minutes. Yeah, more than 5 or 10 minutes that Seba that Insigne can put in. Come on, Seba. It seems that he's becoming a bit of a mascot, isn't he, Seba? He loves the city. He loves the team. People forget how he left in that few months. They forget about that pretty quickly. But hey, let's celebrate the past. Once upon a time, everyone hated Jimmy, and now they love him at TFC, right? So times change. So, it's more of a mild dislike. Okay, that's not true. Everyone, you're a legend there, Jimmy. Okay, listen, fellas. Ollie, I want to get your thoughts, all of you, on Miami last night, clinching. And did you see this? They didn't lift the shield. There's a terrible fallout. How can Leo Messi not lift the shit? Shut up, people. Am I being overly harsh here? People that are whining about this don't know fuck all about football and Leo Messi, do they? Ollie, disagree or agree?
Listen, you mean about the trophy stuff?
Yeah,
did you touch it?
Yeah.
Well, listen, MLS is special now. What other football league gets the owners to lift the trophy first anyway? Like I've always gone absolutely nuts. I think they've changed it over the last few seasons where the owner brings the cup to the captain, I believe. I'm okay with that, but I never understood the owners lifting the trophy themselves. I think that's just a big storm of nothing, really. What I appreciated though from that match is the fact that Miami clinched it against Columbus. I thought there was something really interesting there, circling back to our conversations a week or two ago about who would go all the way, and I still hang my hat on Columbus. I think that might have just been a bit of a dagger that they maybe needed, a reminder that they were going to struggle to get through all the way to the MLS Cup final if they do get there. But I think that was way more interesting than lifting the trophy, touching the trophy or not, especially for a guy like Lionel Messi, who's had so many trophies to lift over his career.
I get it, Dubs. Yeah, I mean, do you really think Leo Messi cares about winning the Supporter Shield?
Probably not. But he's on I saw on the MLS site, he's on 46 trophies. Right? When you look at his accomplished, incredible career. So I don't know. I think he cares about it in terms of making himself relevant. He plays half the games. He's still likely to win MVP of the league. I think it's just another part of him establishing his dominance in MLS.
Shows J-Mo, right? You can play half the games as a DP and still be beloved. If in those half games, you look like you give a shit.
Yeah, he's the type of player, even at his advanced age, who can still exert a great deal of influence, on matters and come up with a magical moment out of nothing. Something that Lorenzo Insigne has clearly struggled with. With regards to the trophy thing, I'm with you, James. I mean, what are we talking about here? Like, he didn't lift the trophy, so what? Like, I mean, people just seem to want to rage about the most benign, idiotic. So I'm not sure what the big controversy is here. I mean, if he didn't lift the MLS Cup trophy, I wouldn't think twice about it. I mean, who cares? I mean, why is this such, controversy is giving it too much of credence. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Asa, you and Scott hated it, right?
Yeah, exactly. He needs to lift it for the league, for the team, for everybody. Everyone's watching.
Photo op.
He's brought in for this moment, and he doesn't lift it. He doesn't touch it. It's insulting to the entire league, everyone in North America. Yeah, no, honestly, could care less. In Vancouver, it still hates Miami, so nothing changes there. Definitely a sour taste with whenever Miami comes up. But, statement match. I mean, you look at the games that they've played so far this season. And this one, going back to what Ollie said, a massive opportunity for them to kind of say that, yeah, they kind of separated themselves, did that on the pitch. And then, by winning Supporter Shield early, kind of cemented that. And it's going to be an interesting playoffs. It's theirs to lose. I know we talked about it before that there's contenders in the West and in Columbus, but it's theirs to lose for sure.
You're talking about people getting upset with all things Messi. Wait till you see the price of tickets when Miami come to Montreal because they're playing them in the playoffs. That'll be a topic of conversation and a half. Trust me.
You know what's funny, Ollie, is looking at Ticketmaster and watching the price come down for those verified resales for TFC Miami this weekend because there's no chance he's playing in that game. Jimmy, I have to say, I won't call it a smirk, but when you see these people buying these tickets and just putting them up there for $500 with the chance to see Messi, and now there's no chance, right?
No way. I laugh every time, like when these people spend an absolute fortune to go watch them. I think keep your money in your pocket, watch on TV, have a nice dinner, carry out, enjoy your evening.
Yeah, but you don't appreciate it, Jay, because you played the game. You played against great players. You've taken to the field with Ronaldo. You know, most of us schlebs have never come close to that, right? So the chance to see someone in the flesh, pretty special, right, Craig?
Oh, I understand why people want to see him and why they would pay for it, but they also have to understand that there's a good chance that he's not going to show up a certain amount of games. He's only played, 17 games? You know, another reason why he shouldn't be raising the trophy. I mean, somebody that's playing all the games should be raising the trophy, and maybe for the MLS Cup final that might be different, but yeah, I understand why people want to see him. I mean, he is an absolute legend.
Yeah. You know, I think maybe he's looked at that supporter shield and thought, I've got no more room in the trophy case. Like, where am I going to put it? Beside the World Cup, beside the Copa, beside the Champions League? Like, where?
League's Cup.
The League's Cup.
That's a big trophy, actually. It takes up a lot of physical room.
That's a good point, though, right? And you got the Champs League. You got the World Cup in its cabinet, right? And then probably the Champions Leagues, and then the La Liga crowns. You sprinkle some Copa del Rey's in there. You sprinkle in a Liga, right? Where does the League's Cup and the Supporter Shield fall? Are they right on the bottom, like the foundation to the real trophies? Or is there a Copa del Rey you think slipped down there somewhere?
Or maybe with the under 20 World Cup?
That's a good one. That's a good question. Does the U20 World Cup carry more cadence than...
Or the Olympic Games in 2008?
Or the Olympics.
Olympic Games.
It's incredible.
Yeah, I watched them play in those Olympics.
He's won everything there is to win in football.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
I think the League's Cup and
the
Shield is probably 46 and 45.
I think the League's Cup trophy is in his accountant's cabinet because that's when they figured out it was a pretty good move to come to the States in the end.
How many games of the League's Cup do you think it took him to figure out it wasn't MLS? It was a different tournament.
The supporters still haven't figured it out.
It was the stoppage time in that first match, wasn't it? The free kick. That was it.
Yeah. Oh, I got my first MLS goal. No, you haven't, Leo. You haven't.
Yeah.
That's not the first
What a
one.
league this is. Canadian teams, Mexican teams.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Did you guys see the interesting angle on the Supporter Shield and Inter Miami that none of their 4 supporters clubs are registered with the Independent Supporters Council? So, like, the whole point of the Supporter Shield is that your supporter group get to lift it themselves in addition to the team, but they don't have any registered supporters groups.
Really? Why not?
Yeah. I don't know. Paperwork. Wow. I don't know.
Paperwork is fair. That's funny. Yeah. So they should be stripped from them because they have no official supporters.
You can't win it.
Right.
Yeah.
Ollie, JMO, thank you so much. This is fun. And we'll talk again next week as the playoffs loom and decision day getting closer and closer. Maybe not for TFC because they finish things off this weekend.
We'll talk about Leo's match. All the best.
See ya.
Bye, Ollie. Bye,
Thanks,
Jim.
Ollie.
Ollie, Brett, and
Thanks,
John
John.
Molinaro. That's well, what a crazy season it's been, though, right? You look at Vancouver's been consistent pretty much throughout. You look at TFC, started so well in the playoff hunt all year long, and then just shit in the bed late in the season. Hey, listen, they could still do it, but unlikely. And there's Montreal, who were an afterthought, it seemed, in the playoff conversation, Dubs, for most of the season, and now they're not in the air, but it's looking really positive for them.